Yeah. So I'm sitting here with Sean Mahar. Mayor or Mar?
I pronounce it Mahar. You can call me anything you want.
I'm an Nebraskan, so we have our own way of saying words, and I've been informed we don't really have a dialect. We have a different style of speaking. We smush words together into y'all, or we draw out, different words to make them more better. Skip makes fun of me all the time. He's got his Texisms, so
I do want to say I like that because meanings aren't as precise as most people think they are. There's a blurring anyway, so you're doing great with it.
So Sean's here to talk about communication style. We originally had called this session. What was it? What's the title of your book there, Sean?
The title of the book is "Stop Wasting Words: Leading Through Conscious Communication." Stop
wasting words. So we're going to start off this part one with why are people wasting words? What are they doing? Like, I talk and all my words count, right? So this resonates well with engineers because engineers are always like, stop wasting my time. And I like what you had to say. It's like, stop wasting words. So tell me a little bit more about what this problem is with people wasting words. What do you mean by that?
Interestingly, as I thought about what you were asking me for today, I had all this, bright and wonderful rehearsals in my head. But when you prompt me with that question, I want to go dark just for a couple minutes. When people are on their deathbed, they do not want to hear words like productive, proactive, outsourcing, bottom up, top down, clickbait, outside the box, redoubling efforts. They want to hear words that are meaningful, that touch them, that produce effects in their world, and not waste their words, because words are too precious at that point for end-of-life experiences. What we've done is just assume, like, in the real world, there are words that accomplish things and words that actually tend to prolong things and diminish success. And so that was our focus on trying to clarify how communication actually works in this book, Stop Wasting Words. So when you know more about communication, you don't waste as many words.
Yeah, we have a saying in our...
I'm sorry?
So we have a saying in conversations is, technicians come into a room and they're going to sell the latest and greatest technology. They're going to give you the best solution on the planet, the best server, the best firewall, the best blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they're not using words that set the client up for success. So yes, in the technician's world, this firewall that's running at 10 gig capacity with IPS, to them that's important. But to the client's wondering how do I grow? How do I work this in a way that matters to me personally? And the technician is just using words. So we have a phrase we say, if you use the term firewall in a business conversation, you should be fired. And it's because you're using words that don't matter to your client. It's like my wife, when she talks to me about her day at work, she's a pharmacist. She works with veterans all day. She's a clinical pharmacist. So among pharmacists, she's even nerdier. So she uses big words. And to her, these are just words she uses every day.
Everyday words.
I'm a fairly bright guy. I have an advanced degree in a very difficult field. And I'm like sitting here just holding on for your dear life because I love my wife. I love what she has to say. I want to learn about her day, but I cannot stay in context with her because the words she's using are different than what I care about. Like A1C doesn't mean much to me because I'm not a diabetic. I think that's a diabetes thing. And it is. But to the right person, that's the world.
Yeah.
And she's so used to using it. I'm like, wait a minute, is A1C the blood pressure thing or the diabetes thing?
Right.
And I'm kind of like sitting there and all of a sudden I'm off on a tangent in my mind and she's continuing to talk. And I've checked out because I'm trying to remember which is which. But if she were talking to a diabetic, this would be a super interesting conversation about what to do and where and how to regulate this. And they would be all in. But me as an outsider, I'm trying to hold on. Could you just say blood sugar? Because that would make more sense to me. It's a word that does not matter to me. A1C does not matter to me. Am I hitting the right context here? Like words that don't matter, like top-down approach does not matter to a fifth grader.
Most of the words people use don't matter because they're created to express themselves, not to make contact with the other person. So I will use words that are familiar to me and I won't take the effort to find what words will be meaningful to you. Case in point, you began using the word firewall. Anybody who's a firewall should be fired. Okay, that makes sense to me. I want to borrow that word now and remind you that there's also a firewall in your car. I used to install hi-fi equipment in people's cars. It was really fun, including my own. I had to get through the firewall to reach the battery in doing my own thing between the engine compartment and the passenger compartment. There's firewalls everywhere we go, but everybody uses the word as if it only has meaning in their particular speak.
Okay.
So the challenge is to figure out what words are meaningful to the other person, not to me. I literally have to, as I am in this conversation, abandon the meanings that I hold for these words to try to figure out what words will work for you. So let me try and put this in a different perspective now. I still want to stay with the word firewall. Your salesperson and your customer, there's a firewall between them. And I'm proposing that firewall is language. And they've got to get through that firewall before they can talk about product or service. And the firewall that Eric and I mined in 10 years research before writing the book is that most people in every dictionary, in every language, and the stuff that we wrote about works in every language around the world, believe that words have a specific meaning. And go to the dictionary, look it up in Scrabble. There's all sorts of talk shows about what does the word mean? What does the word mean? Except the truth is, and this is in the freshman communication book in every university around the world, meanings are assigned by the receiver, not sent by the sender.
Okay.
So when I say blood sugar, A1C, whatever words I use, I don't know what they mean to me. But because they're words I love, I stay with them. And if you don't get it, you must not be listening hard enough, so I'll blame you. So I'm suggesting to you that language is an enemy until we understand how it works. People hold on to their words despite evidence to the contrary. Now, there's another universal concept to support this point of view here. I'm preparing my next little article for LinkedIn, and there's a concept called the telephone game. In Chinese, it's got another word, conversation mess up or something like that. But in German, there's another word for. There are words for this thing all over the planet. And the basic principle is when I whisper something in your ear, you whisper in somebody else's ear, and then somebody else's ear, and somebody else's ear, the other person winds up with the wrong thing. That proves people can't listen. So this one experiment is done with grammar school children all around the world to come to the same conclusion, except for one small thing. We have people in power creating a test that proves they're right. And that is that we can blame the receiver for misunderstandings and not the sender. And so our work proposes to blame the sender. And here's an example, okay? I brought some different colored ones, but how would you describe this as? What is this?
It's like a wet brown egg from a farm.
Or maybe, yes, exactly. These are farm eggs. If I was in a friendship circle and I put an egg to one person and they passed the egg around, the egg would get through the circle because we care about things that we give people. We don't care about words that we give people. We'd actually follow through to make sure the person had a firm grasp of it. In fact, to make it even more potent, I may take one of these eggs, they're all fresh eggs, and crack it in the bowl and say, these are real eggs, folks. We're going to pass it around. Everybody would give better care to the egg. But if I delegate something, like we have a new career objective or a new plan and a new announcement going out, it's just send the words, hit send, and then blame them if they don't listen. Blame them if they don't understand. So the pattern, interestingly, throughout the book is that people care about things. For example, a coffee cup. If I were to pass you a coffee cup, I would offer you the handle because I want you to get it. But I give you a compliment, I don't care about you getting it. I care about bragging that I gave you a compliment. So I'm going to say, yeah, here's $10. Go out and get some pizza. You deserve it. And you walk around and go, what the hell is this for? And then I walk around and go home and tell my wife, I gave him a good compliment because he deserved it. But it wasn't received because people are so into throwing their words without regard to noticing them being caught. Now, in this thing, I want to just digress a little bit off the firewall thing and move it into a meaningful experience for me that sort of turned my life around. So when I was 60 years old, I'm 72 now, I've been faithful to my master's degree in communication. I've been teaching interviewing skills, management skills, leadership skills, communication, delegation, organizational communication, all that stuff. Okay. At the age of 60, I was invited to a meeting of a bunch of vice presidents and presidents of a $2 billion company. I was invited because I have some ways of reducing conflict in just a couple words, dissolving conflict. So it never even rises. I just see it, I call it out, and people just calm down right away, especially in complex, aggressive, hostile meetings. So the president of the whole corporation invited me there to do that function because it was going to be a contested meeting. Meeting happens. He gets his pen and paper and says, I know a lot of people want to say something. So when you want to say something, I'll write your name down as you raise your hand. I'll make sure I get to everybody because you all came here with something to say. And I'm sitting there for the first 15 minutes of an hour and a half meeting, and I noticed a pattern I'd never noticed before. And throughout my life, I'd never noticed this pattern, which is that everybody was there to throw their words. And no one was there to catch anybody else's words but their own. It was a word throwing competition. Everybody wanted to say something. And when the meeting was sort of over, people said, I'm going to go back and tell my people that I expressed our point of view, that I put our stuff on the table. But nobody heard any of it. It was a throwing contest. And so the challenge in summary here is when we look at words as tools to tell people what to do or to explain things or to give praise or give compliments, we throw the words out and hope for the best. We look at words as a tool to accomplish something to the person. For example, I want you to feel good about something. What would make you feel good? Well, it's not pizza because I know you're diabetic. As an example, to use the conversation before. Okay, I'm going to give you a gift certificate to a restaurant that you and your wife can go to. That will be more meaningful because I'm thinking about what would make you happy. Then I choose words that work better to accomplish something. And that works. And that's a huge transition for people.
I really like how you're putting that because, buying that gift certificate for a place my wife and I like to go, there's a prerequisite to being able to do that.
Which isn't, spell it out for me, please, and for our audience.
Is that I had to have learned from you a personal thing that I engaged with. Like we had to have talked about how you and your wife like to go out to this restaurant together.
Yes.
And if you're in a meeting and you didn't get something like that from this new contact or this person you're sitting down having coffee with,
right,
are you really communicating? Did you find something? So I go to these,
exactly.
you go to these books or you go to these lectures where people say, here are the words you need to say in a networking meeting in order to be effective. And so people try to memorize this stuff and they're memorizing. They're putting this on cheat cards and they're saying themselves to them at night or looking in the shower or in the mirror and saying, hey, this is how I'm going to talk. And are so prepared with the words they need to say, they've forgotten to learn about who they're sitting with.
So the speaker has to be listening to the receiver while talking to notice if it's working, not blame the receiver for not having listened to their special words.
Yeah. So just for people listening to this podcast right now, so far in this podcast, like Sean and I have not spent too much time together. It's like our second meeting together. So far in this podcast alone, I've learned that you have diabetes, right?
I do have diabetes.
And you have grandkids. I kind of knew that before, but also
2 young grandchildren.
Your book. And I've learned all these things. And in the back of my mind, I'm just like, oh, this is really interesting. I'm trying to figure out who it is I'm sitting across a table from. I'm really good at talking about myself. It's just something that comes with having my style of personality. So I've had to be very deliberate about, do I know the person sitting across the table from me? If I were to buy them a present after this meeting, could I do it? One time I was talking to my daughter about her boyfriend. I was like, what do you know about him? If you had to buy him a present today, could you? Or is your relationship all words? And so I talk about that with clients as well. Like, do you know your client? What do they do for a living? Like, what is it that brings in revenue? So we call it our 2 Qs is what's your biggest source of revenue and what's the biggest risk to that revenue? And I feel bad because we have to tell technicians and account managers to ask these questions. It's like we're giving them permission to be curious about their clients that they've had for decades.
Well, they've been trained not to do that. They've been trained to show up with scripts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to stay with your daughter for a second.
Yeah.
When my daughter was dating the man she's now married to. Now, okay, so here at home, I'm just an idiot, like every dad. Okay. She doesn't care that I write, that I've been teaching professional interviewing for years, that I taught interviewing to thousands of people. She doesn't care about any of that stuff. Okay.
Profit in their own town.
Absolutely. So she says, I'm dating this guy and I'm not going to let him see you. I'm going to keep him away from you because you know too much about communication. I do not want your judgment on my boyfriend. I'll make those decisions myself. True story. So I said, look, I don't need to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. I want to protect your relationship with him. I do, however, want one question asked. And you can ask it or I can ask it. But when I tell you what that question is, you're going to want to know the answer to it. And when that one question is asked, you will have enough information to go forward. And that is about the past. He said, all right, I give up. What's the question? Just the next time you see him, think about this question. How did your last relationship end? Tell me a story. It ended well, it ended violently, it ended with lawsuits. I don't care if it was a business relationship, a dating relationship. How did the last partnership or close relationship this person had with anybody come to an end? And that is your potential future. She left the room and called him right away. She had to know the answer to that question. And he gave a very good answer. And they've since been married. Not because of me, but again, with stop wasting words, what are the fewest number of words that will accomplish the objective? That's my concern. And they're not the right words. It's finding out by getting to know that I'm a diabetic, that I have grandchildren, that I like Olive Garden or I like the Oyster House. When you get to know things, you can connect your meanings more closely to me. Because, and I'm going to back up with this because I said it and you heard it, but I didn't demonstrate it. I will use the word charger. Okay, lots of different meanings for it. Okay, I'm using the word charger, and I need to know what you mean by that. A better word, table. I'm going to use the word table. I've got a dining room table. It's got some weak spots on. Okay, so we're talking about table. Is it used as a poker table, a backgammon table, a chess table? Does it seat 8 people, 10 people? Does it have leaves? All of a sudden, we have to drill down to find out, what do you mean by table in order for me to talk to you about it? Pool table, exactly.
No, SQL table. I'm looking at how to data and organize data into a SQL table like that. Right. And I'm also thinking about my woodworking. I love to do woodworking in my spare time. And how would I build a table? What kind of table to build? Oh, I've got that piece of wood back there. And that's my brain. It immediately goes off. And you might have been talking about a pool table.
I offer in truth that everything that comes out of my mouth is a rough draft until I bounce it off what those words mean to you. And I cannot tell you that your meanings are wrong. I cannot accuse you of misinterpreting me. I can only accuse me of not having found the best words to work with you. Did that make some sense?
Yeah, because two of my friends, they are Bible translators over in Botswana. So
cool.
Depending on your religious affiliation, this is a really interesting topic. Whatever field you're in, whatever your belief system is, it's interesting because they're trying to take a very conservative text and translate it into the heart language of another place. So these people can read English and they can read just fine, but there's a difference between reading words and reading them in the language that you were taught when you grew up, which is what they refer to as the heart language.
Yes.
And so they'll spend, weeks agonizing over a single word or a phrase, because what is the similar phrase in their heart language so that they can relate that.
And they're creating meaning in that process too.
Emotion.
Yes.
And that's hard. And it's really hard. And it taught me a lot. I love listening to Kelsey and Carl talk about heart languages because it really opened my eyes to this idea of I can say something that has completely different context to the person across the table. And I cannot place that context until I know a little bit about who they are. So I almost open every sales call with, tell me a little bit about what brings you to us today. And I'm trying to glean out their story. And I think this is great. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop this podcast here, and then we're going to segue into, how do we make this better? How do we learn about the person across the table from us in a conversational way? What kind of tools are there, if there are tools, or just how to change your mindset from presenting to people to conversing with them. So
can I offer one more story before the close? I don't know. You're aware of your time. I'm not.
One more, and then we'll move into the solution.
One of the things I want to share with you in this first podcast is some of my motivation. I worked in healthcare for a lot of years. People are dying at a rate of 140 people every day because of misunderstandings in healthcare. And that's not me talking. That's tons of research from companies that have to pay out settlement claims, trying to find out how to prevent deaths. That's misunderstandings in communication that could be completely eliminated if people cared about connecting the meaning instead of just reading the discharge instructions. Yeah. So this is, you can imagine the business implications are just incredible, but this is real stuff for me. Thank
Imagine
you.
How many contracts and how many relationships have broken in your career, how much money you've lost, how many relationships you've lost because you didn't communicate effectively. And now somebody's either angry at you, disappointed in you, or think that the grass is greener on the other side, which is what we're going to cover in the second episode here. We're going to talk about how to have these better conversations, how to relate to other people. So Sean, we'll see you on the other side.
The ultimate MSP podcast crossover.
Hi, I'm Todd Kane, and I'm the host of the Evolved Radio podcast. We're celebrating the ultimate MSP podcast crossover event all through September. The best piece of business advice that I've ever received is what gets measured gets managed. And this is from management godfather Peter Drucker. This is really useful because MSP owners are very busy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to focus on, and you can get pulled in a lot of different directions. And if you understand what good looks like, you have these measures that are clearly understood by yourself and the staff. They act as objective measures that help everyone to understand what good looks like, so that everyone can focus on what the priorities are and know when the business is off track, what areas need support, and allows you to focus on more of the strategic activities rather than being dragged into the day-to-day and the minutia of the business. Then if things are red and showing as off track, then you know where to apply some energy. But otherwise you get to stay out of the day-to-day and be more trusting with the staff so that they can be more independent with the day-to-day and the management of the activities that they're supposed to be responsible for, because they know what good looks like. They have those objective measures, and allows everyone to work on the parts of the business that will move everyone forward. And it feels like everyone's working on the same thing and pulling in the right direction, and know when it's working and when it's not. So when it's not, just work with the team, be curious, ask lots of questions. Why do we think this isn't working? What are we not doing? Are there processes or systems that we're missing? And it allows a more balanced approach to the troubleshooting of the things that naturally go wrong in the business. So I'll be back for our Ultimate MSP Podcast crossover on September 30th. And remember, you can win $1,000 by posting about our crossover on LinkedIn. You can use the hashtag MSP Podcast Crossover to enter the draw. See you then.